everybody. Welcome back to Destination. I said it wrong, Adam. I didn't say my normal one. They threw me off. Matt threw me off. Hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, joined as ever with Adam Stoker. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing great, Stuart. I'm in Arlington, Texas right now for One West Tourism Alliance. And I
Nice.
got to say, every person who achieves some like version of celebrity will start to take the fans for granted. And the fact that you no longer called the audience your fine friends, I actually think that's a demonstration of where you think you are in your celebrity progression.
Well, in full disclosure, this might be the best or the worst episode we've done so far. So one, it might be the best because we got some amazing guests, and we got two guests on today, which was always the vision. I wanted it to sort of be a sitting around a campfire having a chat. So we're going to introduce those in a sec. But full disclaimer, I am on day 3 of a cleanse where I've literally eaten no food. This is my 3rd day of eating no food. So I'm drinking like supplements and stuff, but my head's a little foggy right now. So this could be really interesting. I had a problem word finding yesterday. I couldn't remember the word warehouse. It's like I don't know what's going on, but my body is sort of saying things are happening. I don't know if it's going to be good things or bad things, but we'll see. We'll record and
So
put
a
it out,
cleanse
whatever
update
happens.
next week then.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I'm still alive by then, but I'm very, very hungry right now. So bordering on hangry, but it's fine. We're going to push through. And we're being very rude, Adam. We got to introduce our guests. So two of the smartest people in the industry. I've really enjoyed having some deep conversations with both these guys. So Matt Stiker and I'm gonna butcher your name.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Kwaku Amuti. Is that right?
That was absolutely
Nailed
perfect.
it.
Yeah.
And Matt, did you want to give us any like rhyming recommendations or suggestions?
No, he doesn't want to. It's fine.
No,
He's okay.
Except that you didn't do the cleanse episode with Katie Briscoe.
Well, that was sort of a cleanse and a purge of Adam's opinions, I think, that episode. So
I don't know. I thought it reinforced it, but maybe I'm biased.
I think it was a tie. It was an even tie. That's what we're going to go with. Today is going to be a really interesting conversation. I got to see these two gentlemen on stage recently present on a topic of code switching, and it was really fascinating. And it was one of those topics that really got me thinking differently, and that's really what I look for in presentations. So I'm like, let's bring these fine fellas onto the show and see if they can change some minds and get other people thinking as well. So that's going to be the topic. But before we get into that, it is that moment. And I got to tell you, this is another reason it might be the greatest episode ever. For those watching on video, we've got some really interesting backgrounds here. Our guest came fully flying the flag of Stu's News. And not only that, we have a user-submitted Stu's News jingle. So we're going to air it, and then, Adam, you can tell us who this came from. But we actually have more than one listener now, because I don't think this came from your mom. But let's listen to the new jingle.
DMO pros, it's time to tune in. Stu's got the news, so let's begin. Trends, hot takes, and funding debates, keeping you sharp in this changing space.
A little R&B, I like it.
It is. It's cool, man. It's got a good vibe.
See, I don't feel like you hate it enough. That's my problem with it.
Yeah, I like this one. Better that bit, like Stu's News. It's cool.
Stay in the know, get the latest in time.
I think it's a massive upgrade personally. So where do we get that one from, Adam?
So this was a guy named Dustin, Dustin Rowe from an organization called Check What's Good. So everybody go to his website at checkwhatsgood.com.
Yeah, and he is doing some good work. He's really trying to, if you remember a few episodes back, we had Bill Geist on talking about one of the problems in DMOs' event calendars. And I think he might have half of that solution at least, and maybe the full solution. So we're actually talking to Dustin right now, and he's been tuning in, and apparently he agrees with me that the original jingle needed an upgrade. And there we are. So let us know in the comments, what do you think? Do you want the original, the OG Adam one, or this brand new one? I don't know. It could be the controversy of 2025.
Yeah. Where's my team at? Because I really need some help. I'm not ready to move on from the original jingle.
All right. Do we actually want to talk about Stu's News, or do we want to keep pontificating on the jingle? I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's do the news.
I like the jingle.
Well, today's is maybe a seismic shift. So we've talked a lot about AI, and this is, I saw a YouTube video. We'll put this in the show notes. But there's a new AI tool out there called Manus AI. and the URL is manus.lm, but it's a dramatic jump towards AGI. So general intelligence, basically. So artificial general intelligence. And so right now, most of the AI tools that we're using, whether it's ChatGPT or Perplexity, they're linear, right? We'll ask a question, it'll give us a response. We'll ask another question, it'll give us a response. What this does is it chains together multiple queries at once. You can set it with a task. And in the video, this gentleman that just got access to it was showing, he literally told it to go research the top video games in a certain genre and create and deploy a web-based video game. And it did everything for him. It created everything from scratch. And then he concurrently started a new chat and said, go and research this topic about video games that have been created by AI and create a website that documents and feeds in new ones as they're created and rate them and give people the ability to comment on them. And this thing went out, did all the research, pulled all the things together, and literally created a game. He had to go through a couple of there were a couple of glitches and errors where he had to like put in a password or prompt it to fix the problem. But within like a 30-minute video, he's created a brand new website and a video game that actually is functional. Now, could you question whether it was great or not? No, but this is a glimpse into the future of what AGI is going to be one day, where we can just sort of say, go do the things, and it does it. And that's really scary to me. It's the first time I've seen AI be like and being like, oh man, this is getting real. And I'm going to couple that with a quote that came out from OpenAI this week. Or actually last week, and that was, in the next 2 to 3 years, they believe our world is going to look more different than we currently look from the 1500s. That's their prediction based on how close they are to AGI. So I'm going to throw that on you guys. I know not everyone's seen the video, but what are your thoughts on that? And I'm going to throw it. Let's go, Kwaku first.
Ooh, I am partly intrigued by it. Because of the functionality of it. But I sit with you in the space of being a little freaked out by it too, because what I think it does is, you know, I'll put my age out there. I'm 47. I come from a day where you had to do so many of those, you know, small tasks in order to get something done or ask a question or whatever. But to have something like this that will go out and do it for you, I'm scared for future generations that they won't know how to do, you know, even the most basic of functions. You know, they won't know what questions to ask. They won't know what to do because so many of these things are being done for them. So I'm part yay, part nay.
Yeah. Matt, where do you stand on this?
Unsurprisingly, probably same camp as Kwak is on this one. You know, within the agency, I think I'm seen as sort of the John Henry of this world, that you know, there is going to be a man and there is going to be a machine, and ultimately the machine is going to win. But by God, John Henry's going to go down swinging, you know. And what's really interesting to me, based on what Kwak just said, is this notion of destroying the capacity of critical thought. That if I'm not trained in how to understand a problem and I just simply invite a machine to solve a problem for me, then ultimately, am I really relevant? You know, it gets kind of, and this is jumping ahead, Stuart, but it gets kind of directly to one of the topics that I know you guys have talked a lot about, sort of the relevance of DMOs, you know, all of that. But ultimately, like, just staying on this issue for me, man, if we're losing the ability to think critically, and if we're losing then also the ability to think creatively, then I don't know that there's sort of hope for humanity. Bam! Like,
wow. Adam, where are you sitting?
I think there's hope for humanity. I'll start there. You know, this is a little bit of a dilemma that I think all of humanity is dealing with right now, is as the snowball of technology continues to roll, do we protest the fact that it's rolling and stay on the sidelines as our protest? Or do we get involved, try to identify the problems and try to help solve them along the way? And so, Kwaku, I think you identified a really interesting problem, that basic human tasks and the knowledge of how to do them are going to be lost if AI continues at this rate. So my response to that is, well, okay, then how do we get in and preserve some of the how-tos and dial it into a very simple educational structure that I believe could even be the next generation of replacement to continuing education, which in a lot of cases, in my mind, seems like it's losing its relevance at a rapid pace. And so if we go from continuing education being some of these degrees that no longer prepare you for the professional world the way they did 10, 15 years ago, if we can teach kind of basic human knowledge so that it can be preserved from generation to generation, to me, that's solving the problem as the snowball continues to roll, as opposed to protesting that it's rolling as you watch it go down the hill and get left behind.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting. I like to watch movies that aren't that great. And I did catch one the other day. Well, it wasn't greatly rated, but there was a piece of it that made me think of it. It's on Netflix, The Electric State, and it's the sci-fi.
I saw the preview for that.
It's the sci-fi sort of like Spielbergian, tale. But it's about the connected community. And it was so interesting to watch because there's one scene in there where, it's like no one knows what to do anymore because it's not a spoiler alert. They put these headsets on and you can almost have things done for you. You can live in this space where the most menial tasks are done by robots that are driven by. So it's like two people in one place. So it's a very weird thing. But it makes me think of, this topic makes me think of that too. Like, it's like,
yeah,
I have a 16-year-old son and I want him to be able to know how to think through a problem instead of just typing, can you do this for me, and let it go.
Yeah. We're beginning to see that problem, even with the standard AI that people have been adopting for a few years now, that critical thinking seems to be the biggest skill that we need to train, especially younger folks coming in. I'd say, I'm around your age too, Kwaku. I just turned 48. So us Gen Xers that have sort of taken our hard knocks and done the works hands-on have this sort of level of experience and wisdom that we've earned over the years. And so when we're using AI as a prompt and it's giving us back, whether it's a press release, whether it's a strategic plan, we can see like almost intuitively where the problems are and we can make the adjustments. But if you're coming in cold from college and you got none of that wisdom or experience, you lack that ability to see the problems, and so you just accept. And so I think our job is primarily to train people on those discrepancies and to show them how critical thinking has to be applied. And so I think that's going to be a skill set we're certainly going to be looking for more, especially in the younger folks that we hire.
But what a responsibility for us, because I think human nature is to go, that's a problem. Somebody should solve that. And I think our responsibility as some of the bridge generation, which, I'll put myself at the younger end of where you guys are at on this call. But I would say the responsibility is to not only identify the problems because we have the knowledge of the before and after, but also to get active and try to solve that problem. And that's a heavier responsibility than I think a lot of us have maybe even thought through, that just identifying problems is no longer enough.
No, it's our imperative. It's our responsibility. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was about a guy that tried to create a grill scraper. So, a lot of the scrapers you use on your grill, they have the little metal prongs that will fall off, and that's dangerous. So he tried to create a new one that didn't have that problem, but he wanted every aspect of it to be made in America. And he started going and trying to source the different parts that he needed and found that people in America weren't making this stuff. And even if he found the people that were making the thing, he couldn't find people that made the tools to make the stuff as well. So there's like this massive loss of knowledge that's happened even in the United States, which is one of the most technologically advanced countries. We don't have people that know how to do fundamental things like create the tool that makes a screw. Like that doesn't exist in America in any meaningful way anymore. And so we're heading down this road that is borderline what you described, Kwaku, in that movie, borderline idiocracy, the movie, where we're going to be sort of sat around not really knowing how to do anything because the machines are going to be doing it for us. So to me, we can either bury our heads in the sand or we can embrace it, learn it. I've been spending a lot of time with Manus looking for how it does, what it does well, what it doesn't do well, and then trying to anticipate where we're going 3 to 5 years from now. Because if OpenAI is right that it's going to be more foreign to us in 3 years than the 1500s are to today, we've got to move really quickly. DMOs cannot stand on the sideline of this one, because if we do like we did with digital, like we did with mobile, like we did with every other transition, DMOs will not exist, period. And so we've got to think about how do we future-proof and what is our role in that future?
You know, there's another piece of it, and this is probably something that Kwok, you, me, and Adam, and Stuart, probably you less so, is that some of that critical thinking, in order to get to the kind of work that we all want to do on behalf of our clients, some of that critical thinking needs to come from our clients, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
need to be in a position to say, I want great, and you're giving me good. Well, if they don't know necessarily the difference between good and great, then good will be good enough always.
Mm-hmm.
And so that
Until it's not, right? Until it just doesn't work anymore. There was a report came out this past week too about the statistics related to digital media. And if you look at, like, they claim there was an X number of trillion of impressions in digital media now. And if you do the math, that every single human being was watching stuff for 6 hours a day, there wouldn't be enough. There's not enough impressions for that. And so it's like something's off with digital media in general. Like, I think there's some inflation of numbers, some inflation of performance, and that performance is certainly decreasing. And if we don't adjust now, it's gonna be too late.
Are you saying that there's some problems with paid media, Stuart?
Yeah. Do we need to bring Katie back on and debate that? No, she's the first to acknowledge that, right? That it's
Of course.
It's not perfect, right? MMGY is obviously our agency of record for paid media, and they do a stellar job. But as I'm sure your agencies do as well. But it's not without its problems, right? As a whole. So anyway,
Sure.
I think
about the fact that, you know, there are two kinds of advertising. This is an adage, by the way, that I think goes back to the 60s. Two kinds of advertising. There's great advertising and there's invisible advertising, right? And we have the opportunity now with the devices that we have access to and the technology that's on those devices to skip whatever the hell that we want, to bypass everything, right? So that idea of, you know, the gap between good to great is not here anymore. It's here, right? And there's all this work that's being done in the good space that ends up just simply being invisible.
Yeah.
How do we get to great?
And that problem's going to get worse because of agentic AI that's coming, right? We're not far from a place where I've been playing around with travel requests with Manus, and it's pretty good at me saying, hey, plan a trip to here, here's who's coming, book it, and it'll get pretty close to doing everything. And we've seen that with Operator as well, as doing the same with OpenAI, and Google has their version of an agentic. So where does the DMO fit in that? It's a question. But let's segue a little bit, because now we scared the crap out of everyone. Let's talk about some fun, positive opportunities for DMOs and in this concept of code switching, which is not a new concept, but you guys are certainly the first I've heard talking about it in the DMO sphere related to messaging and marketing to different audiences. So, you know, I'm going to hand over the floor to Kwaku and Matt and let you guys talk a little bit about why this is a topic that you're so passionate about.
Kwaku, do you want me to kick off?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, Kwaku and I have been working together now for 1.5 years or so, and I think sort of almost from the moment that we met, sort of in the first interview, realized that there was something that both of us were bringing to a conversation. And I think over the course of the 1.5 years, we first did this presentation back in December, just at an all company thing. And over the course of that period, just really started to land on this idea without framing it. And I think, Kwaku, it was ultimately you that sort of put the name to it, that we built the presentation around. But it's all predicated on this idea that, you know, audiences are fragmented. There is no sort of monolith anymore. And platforms that we're all using are overcrowded in many cases because there are too few of them, because they sort of draw the masses, that a lot of times the messaging, like we were just talking about, ends up being too generic, that it's just simply not finding its way to great, but it ends up being good because that's what people end up being comfortable with, whether it's a result of stakeholders, a result of budgets, or whatever it is. There's all kinds of reasons, quote unquote, for it, but messaging often ends up being pretty generic. And we find ourselves always in this position of like, how do we be aware of that third rail of destination marketing, which is that every destination wants to say they have something for everyone. And we just find that that's incredibly dangerous. There was a quote that we found that, I always really still loves, despite the fact that I've been in the destination industry for a while, I still love looking outside the industry, and that's where my roots are, outside the industry. But we found this on racked.com, this quote that was, "There cannot and should not be something for everyone. A restaurant with a menu the size of a book that claims to offer you American, Chinese, French, and Italian probably isn't serving up five-star cuisine." Right?
So the
Like,
Cheesecake Factory
100%.
implicated here.
100%. Yes, exactly right. But that notion ends up being really important as we think about how do we make sure that we're doing something not for everyone, but something for you, Adam, something for you, Stuart, something for you, Kwaku, something for me, and for everybody else. Kwak, do you want to hit the analogy? Because I think the analogy of the metaphor is just so good.
Well, even going back, as you were talking, it brought me back to when I first started, because you were relatively entrenched in both worlds, in the DMO and the non-DMO world. I came from a non-DMO background. This had been my first foray into that DMO space. And a lot of this came to be because when I first started as a creative director, I was looking around at all of our clients, and I was, and then I was looking around at the space in general, and, comparatively studying, our competition. And I was seeing that there was just this sea of sameness. And, we would get clients, and, we would get into meetings, and the client would sit down and tell us everything they had going for them. And then I'd have another meeting, and the client would get down and tell us what they had. And it seemed like it was the exact same thing. We've got breweries, we've got outdoors, we've got this, we've got that. And I can remember at the time being extremely frustrated and thinking like that there wasn't a lot of space for me in this space. And we found it the other day, but I wrote something to Matt about that, about the fact that, and we get to it in our presentation, but it was like, what's going to be the differentiator between a destination and another destination if they all have the same thing? And it could be the people, it could be but ultimately we landed on the fact that people don't travel to be somewhere different more than they travel to feel something different. Because that's what'll have the family that goes to Disney World 12 times, for 12 years straight, or because it's not because of this is my favorite restaurant, this is my favorite. It's what do those things on a deeper level make you feel? So for us, going back to what we were talking about and that quote about, the differentiation, we use an analogy in our presentation of it's using the movie Jerry Maguire. And we asked the question, was Jerry Maguire a romantic comedy or was it a sports movie? And generally, and Matt, in the times we've done it, it's funny, we've landed more on sports movie. But the interesting thing about Jerry Maguire is it's actually both. So it was marketed in two different spaces. It was marketed as a sports film on your ESPNs, but then it was marketed also as a romantic comedy on shows like Oprah back in that space. So it brought up the idea that you can communicate in two different ways to two different audiences about the very same thing. And so,
doing so.
What'd you say?
Still be authentic in doing so, right? Just marketed and presented different ways.
Yeah. So when we sat down and started talking about it, where we came up with putting the word code switching to it, because we didn't make it up. It's something that happens. And I'm very familiar with it as a Black man in America. But code switching defined, it's the practice of adapting one's language, style, or tone to fit a specific audience or cultural context. And it's changing how you communicate depending upon who you're trying to reach. Now, again, this is not a new topic. This is something that has been done by the best brands, in the world, because they know that they don't have to speak the same way to everybody. So
Can you guys give the example too that is in your presentation about, is it Australian McDonald's?
oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. So, but let's go back. But in order to get to that, let's go first. We sat down and we codified it into a really basic formula for how to code switch. And in that, the first part is it's a three-part equation. You start with context, which means you got to understand the platform and the audience that you're speaking to. So whether it's, and you can do this with media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's, out of home, whatever it is, you have to understand the context by which you're communicating with people, because then that messaging is going to change. If, a print ad can stay up and you don't have words, but a TikTok, you might have a minute to get your message across. And then next, you have to understand the culture. You got to align with that audience's values and nuances. And that is very important. That's a very, very important step, because that step in a lot of situations, and probably with a lot of DMOs and organizations, will require you to speak to people who you're trying to reach. If I'm trying to advertise to a Hispanic audience, are there any Hispanic people in the room that can represent that audience? If it's not, and we're monolithic, then we're very, very close to being tone deaf.
Yeah, and that's not just on race, right? That's on age, that's on gender, there's like, it's on affiliations. It's like, if you try to talk to me about soccer, right, football, you may or may not get my language
Soccer.
right, So, yeah, well, football, not American football, football. But yeah, so it's dimensions of differences, but you
Yeah.
need someone representing.
And that's the thing. One of the things that is so great about how we present it is it goes beyond, like, people will sit on the race part, but it's way beyond that. It's age, it's orientation, it's whatever,
Yeah.
because I'll see an ad. Well, one of the fun examples that we think of is Disney. So Disney, when they create movies, you'll find, if you have kids and you've gone to a Disney movie, you'll find that when you're watching the movie, there will be jokes in that movie that the kids won't even get, but that you'll get. And you'll be like, oh, they put that in there for me. So they are communicating, and it kind of perks your ears up. But again, going back to the equation, we have context, we have culture, and then the last one is consistency. And that's a really important one as well, because in that communication structure, you don't want to lose the essence of who you are. You don't want to change up the game so much that you're not even who you are as a brand anymore. So now, going to the McDonald's example that we love, there was an agency in Australia that was tasked with speaking to late night audiences, and I'm doing the air quotes, but late night audiences on behalf of McDonald's. People who were out drinking, or who had a long, pretty fun night that they may or may not remember. But what they did with this advertising, so they ran out of home ads on bus stops, and what they did was they changed the language up of a McDonald's order. So instead of chicken McNuggets, it was like Miggin Chick Muggets. But it was so close to what you would think it is, that you're like, oh, I know what that is, but it was jumbled up. But again, it was really using that formula. They knew who they wanted to talk to. So they knew the context by which they were talking. They knew the culture. And again, culture is not always race. The culture of the late night audience. And then they spoke consistently, because they didn't change their fonts. They didn't create a new product. They used everything that they authentically had as McDonald's in order to communicate this message. So it was like Nick and Chick Muggets with barbecue sauce is one, and then Barge Lies with Tomato Horse. But you know what they are after you read them. Again, which I think was so awesome about this campaign, was it had stopping power too. Because when you see Nick and Chick Muggets, you're like, what is that? And you stop for a second. So it did all of those things, but that was a perfect example of what code switching is. So again, going back to it, it's context plus culture plus consistency.
Yeah,
I love it.
Can I ask a couple questions here?
Yeah.
First of all, for my next charades party, Matt, would you be willing to join me so that you could act out? I want you on my team for acting out things for charades. But the second thing that I wanted to ask you guys, so I, by the way, agree, and I wish I could have seen this presentation because it sounds amazing. And I agree that we need to code switch for the audiences that we're talking to. I want to make sure that I kind of identify a couple of the guardrails for the DMOs that are listening, so that they can understand kind of where the line is. Because I could see a scenario where if I'm a 1, 2, 3 person show at a DMO and I hear your presentation, I'm going, well, I'm never going to have a staff of 25 people.
You cut out there a little bit, Adam, but keep going. I think you're back.
Okay, it's in case I cut out. It's basically I could see a small DMO saying, "I'll never have a staff big enough to have representation for every audience I want to talk to." Right. So that's one concern that I would have as a DMO that's listening. But for two, Americans, and I guess it doesn't have to be just be Americans, but we'll use Americans as the example. We can be divided into race, we can be divided into economics, we can be divided into region, we can yada 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 yada, right? So where do you draw the line on how far you want to go? Because I think if you're code switching in 25 different messaging types, you're overdoing it, right? So what are the guardrails around doing? How do you identify an audience that is significant enough or important enough? And even as I word it that way, I could see that being misinterpreted. But how do you know that that's someone you need to create unique messaging directly to?
Kwaku, you wanna go, or you want me to go?
Go for it.
Adam, your first question is a good one, and definitely there are an awful lot of DMOs. Could be 3 people, it could be 12 people, that are faced with that. Kwaku and I have talked a lot about that and have found that oftentimes within that DMO's community, so the community of stakeholders, they will find people of a particular orientation, people of a particular background and culture, that they can use as checkpoints, right? So I don't need to have them on staff. And if I don't have the budget, I don't need to, if I can't afford an external agency to provide the perspective on those audiences. Within the communities, they can often find those people, and it serves multiple purposes anyway too. When you're doing that, you are affirming to your stakeholders how valuable they are within the community, right? So that would be probably the answer that I would use, that you've got sort of an informal advisory committee of sorts that they can tap and just do a gut check on that stuff, to make sure that the culture, as Kwaku was explaining, is right. I think the other one is a really interesting one too. And yeah, I mean, that list could be forever, right? It wasn't that long ago that, the media choices were very much more limited than they are today. And therefore, like, my ability as a marketer to run multiple campaigns against multiple audiences was really difficult. Today, it's really, really easy to create campaigns because we can so surgically target individual groups. But I think, the point ultimately is about, like, is there a level of right to each? I think if you went around to most of our DMO clients, that they would probably be able to say things like families are important. Those people who are really interested in the outdoors are important. I really want to reach diverse, again, Stuart, to your point, a variety, a range of different kinds of diversity. But I don't think it goes down to, this sort of so finite that, I'm speaking to 6 people,
But that raises another question though, Matt, and I think it's an important one, and that's if everybody can dial kind of their top 5 groups into the same relative groups, we're all going to be code switching in the exact same way, and I don't know. I could see that also getting extremely.
Are you suggesting
messy and
DMOs are going
watered
to
down.
copy each other? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would never. No. Sorry, that would happen outside the industry. That would never
Yeah.
happen in the destination marketing space.
Yeah. And I sort of disagree a little bit, because to me it's like, I mean, we got the campaigns that we want to run in this in sort of bigger areas where I think you are sort of being more generic. And I think what was good about that McDonald's example is it both appealed to the target audience, but everyone else sort of was in on the joke too, right?
Yeah.
So I think it didn't disqualify people, and I think that's the thing you got to be careful of, is when you're doing something that's including some group that is not excluding another group, right? I think there's a fine line there. But what we're trying to do at Myrtle Beach is we do want to get to where we're talking to an audience of one, an individual, which is a constellation of interests and lived experiences and things like that. And so we do want to find that context about them as a person, so that we can market to them in the right way. Now we're not there yet. I think it's a ways off, but I think as technology evolves, it's going to be easier to do that, so we can build a really robust profile that says, hey, I know Adam is a BYU fan, and I know all his weird idiosyncrasies and quirks, and so we can leverage that to get him to be more likely to come to Myrtle Beach. And so that's what we're trying to do. So I think it's sort of both. We want to play on both sides of the code switch, and we want to sort of be at a top level, generic enough, but also at a very specific level in knowing what he likes and doesn't like.
I think, Stuart, Kwak, let me just one thing, because I'm going to come touch on your Disney comment that you made just a minute ago, because it relates directly to what Stuart just said. That idea that Disney is pumping out movies that are, generic broadly for kids, that parents then are participating in. Robin Williams, as the genie in Aladdin, can make a joke about size doesn't matter, right? It goes over the kids' heads. It doesn't alienate them, and it doesn't them, right? But the parents,
I don't get it.
So that I think goes directly to your point of like how to be both generic enough and yet also insider enough that we're having that one-on-one.
Well, and one of the questions I think that would be great for DMOs to ask when you finally do hone in on who you want to speak to, a great question to ask, and it's not that you always have to have an answer, but a great question is like, okay, here's who we want to speak to. Now, who are we not talking to and why? Because in some of those cases, it's not that particular group of people is not interested in your place. They just might not feel spoken to, or sometimes it's like, oh, well, that's just not one of the audiences that we're going after. And that's a fine answer too. But just the exercise of asking that question, because again, a lot of times we're talking about KPIs and everything. We're always focused on who we want. But if you stop for a second and ask, well, who are we excluding? Is there somebody that we're not talking to? And then just one extra layer of that questioning of saying, well, why aren't we speaking to them?
Yeah. I mean, an easy, simple, non-controversial version of that is geography, right? We choose our target markets and we use data to try to justify that, but it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh, I'm putting more money into Chicago. I'm getting more value out of Chicago and more people coming from Chicago. But I might be omitting another market that I've never tested, and because they didn't start out as one that I inherited as being commonly coming to our market from that origin market, then I'm not putting money there. And it's like, I often wonder, and we do some tests to try to nurture new markets, especially if we get a new a flight route between them. But to me, it's like, well, if I look at Myrtle Beach, we're really interesting because our feeder markets are what you would expect. It goes up the eastern seaboard. So North Carolina is obviously really big, but it gets up to Virginia, West Virginia. And all of a sudden, we're sort of across a little bit to Ohio. And there's a bunch of states that are way closer to us than Ohio, and maybe not even closer to the places they're currently going. I'm like, wonder why Myrtle Beach isn't as appealing to them. We've never put money into them to nurture that market like we have Ohio over the past 20, 30 years, So just geography gets me thinking. And then you can start breaking down to every other dimension of who you're excluding from your conversations as well.
Yeah, because at one point, Ohio was probably not big on your radar. But then why did I'm a question. Matt knows me very well. I'm a question asker. I do like the little kid. We do that so many whys until you get to it. But it turns into, for me, the questioning, becomes, well, what is it about your destination that makes people from far away come? Like, what's the feeling? What's the emotion that they come there for?
Yeah.
Because outside of the groups, you can characterize a person as I'm a this and this and that, but at the end of the day, there are only so many feelings that only so many emotions that people are after, in life. So what about your destination is tapping that for those people in that place? And then how do you do the people closer to you, do they have that same feeling, or do they have a different feeling?
Yeah.
A different emotion that we can tap or we can emote, because everything is emotionally driven.
Yeah, this is certainly something we don't have the answer to, but it's something we're exploring now based on the conversations and the presentations you guys have made. So I think we're really thinking a lot about the concept. I don't know if you remember several years ago, probably 10 years ago now, there was and I forget the guy that wrote it, but there was a sort of open letter to the internet talking about 1,000 true fans. Do you remember this? They
Yeah.
were talking about if you have 1,000 really fanatical fans, how impactful that can be. And I've started looking at how on social media, when I post something about Myrtle Beach, it could just be like a picture of the ocean. There are dozens and dozens of people that just say the most flattering, lovely things. You know, whether they're coming to Myrtle Beach and saying, "Hey, I'm going to be there in July," or "I just left. I just was there in June. It's my favorite place," or people just like, "I can't wait till I go back there." Like, there's people out there that just have this connection with Myrtle Beach that is fanatical, and we don't tap into that nearly enough. And so, I think we're spending a lot of time thinking about that and how do we articulate what that feeling is and what drives that feeling, and then how do we capitalize on it. So that concept of 1,000 fanatical true fans is something we really even thinking about. Do we build our website experience to cater to them, knowing that if we create a enough gravity with those 1,000 true fans, or in our case the million true fans, will other people naturally want to be a part of that tribe, right? And so we're really rethinking, flipping that website mandate, because right now it's sort of tailored to the lowest common denominator of the person that doesn't know anything about Myrtle Beach. Well, what if we flip that? What would the implication be? So we're toying with that idea. We're at the very early stages, but it's a fascinating thought experiment for us.
One of the other great sort of adages within marketing is this idea that positioning without sacrifice is meaningless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of back to that, you can't be and shouldn't expect to be everything to everybody. And it's a tricky thing in destination marketing world, but frankly, it's a tricky thing in technology. If you've done any marketing there, it's a tricky thing in cars. If you've done any marketing there, like, you want to open it up to the widest net possible. And yet, we saw Stuart in the presentation, we talk a little bit about Nike and the fact that, here they are with discrete and different categories, from golf to skateboarding and basketball to running. And those are really, really different athletic mindsets. And yet they all respond to this singular idea of empowering the athlete in all of us, which is that positioning statement. And they each take it their own way, right? I don't have to tagline. I don't have to change my brand based on the different categories of athletes that I'm working with. I can adhere to one position. And so therefore, when a Colin Kaepernick situation comes along, guess what? I can hold through to who I am and forget about some of those fans that leave me because they don't agree with me politically. Guess what? They weren't part of my 1,000 true fans in the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I just to respond to that, Matt, because I think you're using a very visible and recognizable situation that a lot of us remember, right? I would encourage DMOs to be a little bit careful and politically smart as to how aggressive they get on attaching to certain issues, and make sure they understand their fans really well before they do that, because I could also see a scenario where maybe they attach to an issue that alienates too many of those
Like a
1,000
Bud
fans.
Light situation is what you're sort of alluding
Great
to,
example.
right?
Great
Yeah.
example. And I think that's the type of scenario that I think would be difficult to come back from for a DMO. So it's not enough just to have the 1,000 true fans or try to create 1,000 true fans. You also have to know them, which goes into the code switching that you guys are talking about.
You also have to think about the context you live in, right? Because we're not only are we talking to our fans, but subliminally we're also talking to our stakeholders and our constituents as well. So we can't alienate them at the same time. So, Adam, run in a second. Do we need to let you go and continue the conversation, or do you have a few?
Yeah, I need to jump off. Sorry, I got to be on stage in a few minutes here at the summit. But guys, this has been a really fun conversation. Kwaku, it's great to meet you, and Matt. Nice to see you again. You and I have connected a lot over the years, but really appreciate you guys and the conversation you're having.
Adam, do you have like one more minute? Do you have like a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you pull up your phone real quick? You remember last episode we talked about, we gave an invite to people to leave reviews. Do you remember that conversation?
I do.
So I'd love for you to, I think we got one. I'd love for you to read it. Let's read the title of it and then the content first, and then you can tell us who it's from.
Okay.
How about that? And you have not seen this before, I don't think. But it's just a
No.
legitimate, authentic review.
Okay. Love the show. It's been a lot of fun to get to know Adam and Stuart. It seems as if Stuart uses his British accent as a weapon to try to sound smarter than he actually is.
I don't think this is
however,
the one I thought I was thinking of. I think you're making that one up.
That was from Adam GPT. I'll read the real one. So the title is The Greatest Shows for DMOs. I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of my son for hosting such a fantastic podcast. But let's be real. Stuart is the true star of the show. His insights are razor sharp. His voice is smooth as, how do you say butter in British?
Butter.
Yeah,
that what?
And he just gets destination marketing in a way that keeps me coming back for more. Now, don't get me wrong. Adam is doing his best. Bless his heart. He brings great energy, and I'm sure he tries very hard. But Stuart, that's where the magic happens. If you're looking for expert level tourism, boy, this goes on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is longer than the jingle. I just want to throw that out there. Tourism marketing advice, insightful discussions, and the occasional gentle ribbing of my dear son. This is the podcast for you. I highly recommend, especially if you can put up with Adam long enough to get to Stuart's golden nuggets of wisdom. Love you, sweetie. You know what? I got to thank
Who was
my
that
mom.
from? Who wrote that?
There's no way. Oh, it's Adam's actual mom. I can see it right here. Yeah, it had to be her. It sounds like her. And the code switching there is amazing.
Yeah. So we have a real review. So listeners out there, if you want to leave a review, Adam is forced to read them on the show live without having pre-read them. So that's the shtick. But Adam, if they want to find you, where can they do that? We'll let you run, and then we'll continue
in the
conversation.
Review section of Destination Discourse would be the first place to look for me. I want everybody to see that review. You can find me on Tourism IQ on LinkedIn or adam@thebrandrevolt.com.
Cool. Adam, good luck. Break a leg. Go have fun on stage, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
You guys talked in your very first episode about users and like the name and if you were looking for another name. Did you find ultimately another name?
I don't know that we did.
Well, here you go. Tourism IQ. They're the IQsers.
IQsers.
Wow. I love that.
That's good, Matt. Okay, you're hired.
That's
See you guys.
See you, Adam. All right, Matt and Kwaku. Sorry, we had to do that little segue that little detour because Adam had to leave early. But now we can talk even more junk about him, or we can jump back to code switch, and it's up to you guys.
We both of us have a couple minutes probably, and then we've got to jump to another call.
All right.
Let's bang on for 5 minutes if that works for you.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's fun to see. Because in all of the stuff that we're discussing right now, what I think is very interesting, because again, the first thing people will think is like, well, I don't want to be too politically charged, or I don't want to, because again, based on the size of the DMO, you don't want to make a mistake. They could be fatal.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, what I love about and Matt, I give you ultimate credit about this is, the idea of the emotion to evoke. Because outside of your political party, outside of your race, outside of your gender, sexual orientation, you still feel emotion across the board. And I believe that if DMOs would take a moment to really understand, one, that they're a brand, but two, really dig into the emotion that they want to evoke in the people that they want to attract. And the people that are, your visitors and your local residents. and say at that point, okay, so this is my location, this is my destination, this is the emotion we want to evoke. And if you want anything else, then we're not for you.
Yeah, right.
I think that they'll do a better job of being able to hone in on that messaging, how to create messaging, because you're creating messaging at that point from a very, very firm foundation. And that's in how we do our presentations and our client work, that's where we start. And Matt, this is where I give you credit. If we jump into something, that is the first question that Matt always asks. And at this point now, he's kind of beaten it into my head so much that that's the first question I ask. I say, hold on, stop, because I'm a creative and I want to start doing things, but I can't do it unless I have a foundation to work with. So what's the emotion we're trying to get to?
At the part where Kwaku says that I'm beating him around his head. We just
no, that's just a colloquialism. No, but yeah, exactly. But in that, for me, I really, it makes me think about, because when you think about those bigger brands, those best in show brands, that's what they do. They evoke an emotion.
Yeah.
And I mean, interestingly, that all comes from, or a lot of it anyway, comes from that quote from Dr. Maya Angelou, forget what people said, I'll forget what people did, but I'll never forget how they made me feel, right? And so as we look at sort of across the spectrum of our clients and even destinations that aren't our clients, a lot of times, and sort of, Kwak, as you were saying earlier, like they want the differentiation to be rational, but it just simply isn't rational. That differentiation has to be emotional, because ultimately I won't remember probably that I went to a new brewery. I won't remember that I went to 3 neighborhoods. I won't remember that the outdoors was just 20 minutes away. I'll remember how I felt holding my mom's hand at a situation, or my son's hand in any one of those situations, or walking with a partner, a spouse, a lover, whatever. Like I'll remember those things and the feeling much more than the sort of rational experiences that I have.
Couldn't agree more. And I think, we obviously don't have time to dig into this today, but love to have you guys come back on and dig deeper into this subject. Because, the more you look at neuroscience and how that affects our decisions, the more you learn that our emotions are making our decisions, and then our logical brain is rationalizing the decision we've already made, right? And so if we're not appealing to the emotional side, then we're really not appealing to the piece of the brain that's making the decision. So it's something we definitely work on. Our brand is really fundamentally shifted from a transactional brand to an emotional brand in my tenure here, at least. And it's been really effective for us. So I would definitely encourage other DMOs to do the same. So I know you guys have to run as well, but Matt, any final thoughts? And then I'll let Kwaku have the final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a secret sauce here that we as destination marketers are not yet tapping into or really talking about. And that, again, is the ability granted to us by the technology that we now have access to speak to people as individuals rather than as monoliths. And that, more than anything, for me, is the takeaway from this whole concept of code switching.
Like, are you saying treat people like people? It's groundbreaking. It's amazing. Treat individuals like individuals and not big homogenous groups. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Kwaku, bring us home.
I wanna wrap back to something we spoke about earlier, because we were talking about AI and the role of the DMO with the proliferation of AI. For me, the one thing that the one thing that AI cannot do is do that emotion to evoke space. It's not good at it. It is good at, you give it an input, it gives you an output, but there's no feeling there. So I think that in the future, for me, and you can mark this, and if I become right, then that means I'm like Nostradamus. But I think that the DMO survives wholly by getting into that space of the emotion to evoke. Awesome. And staying there.
Prophetic, man. You get 1,000 internet points. they're fake, but they're real internet points.
That's fine. Yes, that's fine.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoy every time we have an opportunity to have a conversation. I hope to see you around on the tour, and you're welcome back absolutely anytime to the show. But if they want to find you, Matt, where can they do that? And we didn't even say where you work, so if you want to give a shameless plug, you can too.
It's LinkedIn for me or Stiker at maddenmedia.com.
Great.
Yeah, and mine is, you can find me on LinkedIn. The spelling of my name should be up there. Or you can find me at Amuti at maddenmedia.com.
Sounds like
Great.
Oh, Jesus. Not spelled like booty, Matt. That's fine. At least we got through most of the episode without Matt saying the word booty, and except for once.
Yeah, I mean, every time I meet him, he has to slip it in at least once. But maybe one of these days he'll grow up. But
we're waiting. We're waiting.
Yeah.
Having us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Audience, if you want to leave a review and get it read out next time, then please go. So we're going to look at Apple reviews, but if you leave it somewhere else, just shoot us a little note that you left it somewhere else. Please like, subscribe. We're really getting some good traction with the show now and a lot of really positive feedback. And if you have a new jingle that you want to submit and let's play, we're happy to listen to those too. So you can email me, stuart.butler@visitmodelbeach.com, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. And until next time, this has been Destination Discourse. My goodness.